Hello, friends and family. My name is Daniel Barrell, and welcome to Diary of a Manic. Today's topic is nature versus nurture in Dexter, or more importantly, nature and nurture, because I don't really like the nature versus nurture debate. I think that it's nature and nurture. So, if you've never watched the TV show Dexter or read the books, I gotta throw it out there. Spoiler alert. I don't want to spoil anything for anybody. If you haven't watched the show, I would recommend you watch it because it's really, really, really good. It's really interesting. At least watch the first season because it's incredible. So, let's get started. We root for Dexter Morgan, even though he's a serial killer, while serial killers in other TV shows and movies are considered villains. Even Dexter's own brother, who is also a serial killer, is considered a villain. I've done some interesting research on the psychology of Dexter, his sister Deborah, and his brother Brian. We'll be looking at these three characters of the TV show who are closely related and illustrate how nature and nurture make a huge difference in how children grow up. So Dexter Morgan is a serial killer who only targets other serial killers. He adheres to the strict moral code that his father Harry gave him as a young man. He is allowed to murder, but has to follow two rules. The first is to never get caught, and the second is to never kill an innocent. His code allows Dexter to satisfy his murderous urges while still being able to justify his kills, supposedly. Without the code of Harry, however, would Dexter have turned out like his biological brother, Brian Moser? Dexter's original last name was Moser. I also should have said that. Yeah, so Brian Moser is kind of the anti-Dexter. He lacks any emotion or empathy because he's also a psychopath like Dexter, but in his own mind he can justify killing whoever he wants, whenever he wants. In fact, a better explanation would be that he doesn't have to justify his kills at all. He doesn't really need to. From a young age, he showed signs of mental illness, including post-traumatic stress disorder, resulting from his witnessing his mother's murder. He spent most of his young life in a mental institution and was released by the age of 21, and as he was able to hide his true self and his psychopathic urges well enough by that time. Dexter and Brian are biological brothers, and they're both serial killers. Is this a result of them witnessing their mother's murder? Or could it be genetic? Or could it be something else? So, we'll round out the characters with Deborah. Deborah is Dexter's foster sister and Harry's biological daughter. She and Dexter were raised by the same parents, but turned out remarkably different. Is that evidence for nature over nurture? Well, we're not here to fight over nature versus nurture. We're here to show the similarities and differences between these three characters. Deborah is almost always, and I say almost always for a reason, the conscience in the show. Her story usually runs parallel to Dexter's in that they're hunting for the same serial killer throughout a season. They're just hunting this serial killer for different reasons. So, now that we've heard a little bit about all the characters, I want to talk about their relationships and how they relate to nature versus nurture. So, first of all, Dexter and Brian are biological brothers. They both turn out to be serial killers, but they have completely different motives. How can nature versus nurture tell us about their differing motives? Well, on the nurturing side, we have Harry's upbringing of Dexter and his strong sense of justice in guiding him. He is taught to only murder people who he knows are guilty of murder themselves, whereas Brian was brought up in an institutional setting and lacks the moral guidelines that Dexter has had so neatly placed before him. I would also like to point out the fact that Brian was treated by counselors most of his life and still murdered when he got out, when he was released from the institution, while Dexter was sent to a counselor once and Harry made him lie so he wouldn't get locked up or something. If Dexter had gotten proper counseling at a young age, would he have turned out the same? And if Dexter had gotten proper counseling, would he have just turned out like Brian and murdered the second he got out? Well, in my opinion, Dexter could have greatly succeeded with counseling. The reason being that he grew up in a positive environment with lots of support from his family. Brian was raised without a family in an institutional setting, and my guess is that it really wasn't that positive of an environment. These environmental differences can hugely impact one's well-being. Now, if we look at Deborah, you have to wonder why she seems less stable than Dexter himself. This can be attributed to both nature and nurture. Deborah was brought up in Dexter's shadow. Harry treated Dexter like number one. He took him on hunting trips and spent most of his free time with Dexter while Deborah was mostly ignored. She joined the police force in hopes that she could get Harry's approval and kept on with it because she needed the approval of male authority figures, aka daddy issues, if you want to be a little barbaric about it. So these daddy issues obviously caused some issues in Deborah's life. She tended to fall in love easily and with the wrong guys. When she met Brian, aka Rudy Cooper, aka Dexter serial killer brother who wants to kill her, she couldn't help but falling in love with him. He's a psychopath and a manipulator. He knew how to use her. So, he seemed like a perfect man for her. Unfortunately, he was using Deb to get to Dexter, and he eventually tried to kill her. You know, dating problems these days. As for the nature side of Deborah's argument, her family showed history of anxiety disorders and depression, which really could have helped lead her to some of the unfortunate choices that she made in her life. In summary, Deborah and Brian were more alike than they ever could have known. They both lived a childhood without sufficient emotion and tenderness. The difference is that Brian also had the genetic predisposition for psychopathy. Dexter and Brian both grew up with this gene, but it was their environment growing up that affected their impulses. I would like to think that if Dexter and Brian both grew up in a more positive environment and got the counseling that they needed, they would have turned out better than the way they did. But nobody can really say for sure. And as far as their mother's death contributing to their murderous urges, it doesn't really seem like anything. They don't really have any impulses that are remotely related to their mother's death, apart from Dexter, spoiler alert, killing the man that killed their mother, like 30 years later or something. But other than that, it doesn't really seem like that affected much. So, thanks for watching this video. I really enjoyed making it. I really love Dexter. It's one of my favorite shows, so I really wanted to do a video on it. Let me know what you thought of the video in the comments. And last but not least, have a great day, guys. Thanks for watching.